Hi, everybody. Welcome to our channel, our Scientology Stories, Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and we've got a great discussion here live for you today. And before we get started, I'm going to introduce my co-host, Janis Gillham Grady. Hi, Janis. How you doing?
Aloha, Mark. Good day, everyone. I'm doing good. Today's conversation, I think, is going to be peeling the onions. So I wore my onions again because I think there'll be a lot of peeling going on here between our guests.
Exactly. And listen, everybody, if you want, get in the chat. Let us know where you're watching from. Hello from Sardinia. I see that. But get in the chat. And I see Goldie's here. She's moderating. Thank you, Goldie. We're glad that you're here. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our two guests. Okay. And the first one I want to introduce is Robin Scott. How you doing, Robin?
Hi. Lovely to be here. I'm very well and really looking forward to our chat. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. And then our second guest is Apostate Alex.
Hello.
How you doing, Apostate Alex?
You got two Brits on one channel. It's like a takeover.
Yeah, and it's live from the UK, right? Live,
Yes.
live in the United Kingdom. Yeah. So anyway,
SPTV is international. It's transatlantic.
Well, we tried to go early enough so that we could, hit that demographic and that audience in Europe and England and all that. But anyway, we want to say hello to everybody. I see Danielle Chamberlain's in there. We've got Mary Klein, who's a member of our channel. Lots of people here, and we're going to have a great discussion. The way this is going to work is we're going to talk first about Alex's protest that he's going to do in November for the International Association of Scientologists. And then we're just going to be a free forum where we're just going to discuss all things Scientology. And if you have a question, you're a participant in this too. So just write the word question, put it in the chat. We will start. And I'll also be putting comments up from time to time. And you can ask Robin or Alex or Janis or myself any questions that you like. And it actually makes it go a lot better for us because it gives us something that we know that we can talk about and have some fun. Is that right, Robin?
Absolutely right. Looking forward to it.
Yep. I call it freewheeling.
That's right. That has another meaning if you're not a Scientologist. Freewheeling basically means you're going into a spin off of OT3, off of all the OT3 materials and stuff. You're freewheeling. Anyway, let's get started. What I wanted to say is we're going to start with our Apostate Alex. And Alex, tell us about the upcoming protest you have going on in St. Hill when they have the International Association of Scientologists.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me on, and thank you for promoting it as well. And for those of you who don't know, the International Association of Scientologists is the membership body of Scientology. The IAS itself doesn't officially exist, but it does operate, like in terms of legal papers and so on. But it does operate through a legal entity called the International Association of Scientologists Administration, who handle all of the money, the donation fees, and so on. And every year they have a gathering at St. Hill, the headquarters, Scientology here in the UK, and it's been on hiatus for about 4 years, I believe, because their international events program paused. It's the largest event in the Scientology calendar. They have this huge tent that they build in the grounds of St. Hill Manor, and it's behind. They have a castle and they have a manor, and David Miscavige comes over and talks to Scientologists from all over the world that flock to East Grinstead to attend about Scientology expansion, about their humanitarian projects and so on. And yeah, it's the first time it's happening in 4 years. So there's a lot of not just pressure on David Miscavige, but there's a lot of attention on this event particularly. So it's the first time they've come back for a while. So I thought, let's organize a protest, because I personally think the abuses that happen in Scientology should stop, right? And I want to send them a clear message. And with the growth of SPTV, my channel, and everything else on the internet that's going on, I think there's a lot more support. So I announced www.iasprotest.com is the website. You can go and register to attend. It currently looks like it's going to be based on the number of registrations we've received, the largest protest against Scientology in about 15 years since the Anonymous movement. I have applied for police cooperation in terms of I want to do a march from East Grinstead down to St. Hill with banners and placards and this sort of thing. And then we'll assemble outside the gates of St. Hill, where we will protest for the whole weekend, the 3 days, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th of November.
Wow.
Do you have to designate an area outside St. Hill where you can protest, where it's not Scientology's property, or how does that work?
Yeah, so legally, in the UK, anyone can protest about anything anywhere that's public at any time. You don't need to get a permit or anything like this. You do if you have a march, which is what we're doing. But if that gets denied, for example, by the police or by the council, we still have the right to do a static protest as long as we're on public land. And there is a little strip of land just outside the main gates that we're able to protest on. We are waiting to hear back from the police and the council. I've applied for road closures to allow us to walk from the centre of town down to St. Hill. But as I said, if that comes back and they say no for whatever reason, we can still situate ourselves on the public land outside the church.
Fabulous. And now you had something new information that you wanted to mention as well, right?
Yes, so I have been doing a lot of investigative work in the background as well, and you've got a little exclusive here, Janis and Mark, for your channel. I haven't released this article yet on my website, but I will do in due course. So anyone watching this, you're hearing for the first time. Scientology have made a bit of a slip-up. They have what's called a premises license with the local authority, which allows them to hold events up to 7,000 people. They're allowed to do this as up to 10 times a year. They don't have to do anything. They can just hold the event. But they do have a couple of prerequisites. And number one is they have to notify the local authorities, the licensing department of the council and a few other entities 6 weeks before they hold the event. Now, they're allowed to hold it, but they do have to submit sort of health and safety and child protection plans and this sort of thing. So I called them up and I just said, I called the council and said, have you received this notification? Because the event is happening in 4 weeks or something. And the licensing officer said, no, we haven't heard anything. I will be popping down there in a couple of days to go and have a chat with them. So yeah, Scientology have announced that they're holding this event. I've spoken to people inside Scientology right now who confirm David Miscavige is expected to arrive in the UK to host the event. Thousands of Scientologists are meant to be there. It's advertised as the greatest gathering of Scientologists, and the condition on their premises license is they have to inform certain people 6 weeks ahead, and they haven't done it. That doesn't mean the event won't be able to go ahead, but it is kind of funny that they have one thing that they've got to do before they hold the event, and they haven't even done that.
and that's pretty usual for them, pretty standard.
Yeah, they just
somebody's in trouble.
Yeah, I think they just kind of they have good established links with the local council anyway, and I just think that they are probably a bit full of themselves and just think, look, well, we can do what we want. That's not important. That's just a symbol of how they think about themselves or how they regard themselves.
Right. Now you have a T-shirt, right? To show for the event. And I have a T-shirt that I'm wearing in honor of the event. So
I love
go
it.
ahead and do this.
I love it. Yeah. So we're going to be live streaming the protest on my channel across the 3 days. If I'm trying to get to 10,000 subscribers, I'm at like 9,600 at the moment, because at YouTube allow you to do fundraisers when you hit 10,000 subscribers. So my plan, if I can hit that number, is to do a fundraiser for the Aftermath Foundation, which helps people leave and escape Scientology, for the protest. So if I can do that, that would be great. But if I don't, it's not the end of the world. We can still live stream it. And for those of you who aren't in the UK or aren't able to attend, you can support the protest by wearing a T-shirt. Mark and Janis have got the one that Mark's wearing now. We've got this one which I've designed, which you can get on apostatealex.com, and on the back the IASP, which is the International Association of Suppressive People, which I thought was just a little bit of fun. But yeah, if you want one of these, you can go grab one at apostatealex.com. But you've got your own as well, haven't you?
There you go. And then in honor of that too, I'm wearing my Rock Slammer T-shirt. because it has the same
Love it.
symbol, right? Has Rock Slammer, and then on the sleeve it's got our Scientology stories peeling the onion. And you can order that one obviously on our merchandise site. Just go down below, right below the comments, and you'll see it. We have both a male and a female version. The other one is a sort of a tank top version, a little bit more feminine. So anyway, yeah. So we thought if you guys want to get t-shirts for the protest, they're right there ready and available to you all. Let me go ahead and put up real quickly. People want to subscribe to Alex's channel to get him up to the 10,000. It's at Apostate Alex on YouTube. Okay. And then I also wanted to mention too, on our channel, we are 5 subscribers away from 9,000. So hopefully while we're on this broadcast, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so, because we're at 8,995 subscribers. We just need 5 more to get to 9,000. And then we got a whole another 1,000 to catch up to Alex. So we want to get to 10,000 sometime soon.
Well, maybe we can get you to 10,000 too, and then we can both live stream the protest if you like.
There you go. That's a great idea. Go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, I just got a couple of practical questions, Alex, because obviously I know that part of the world extremely well. When you say a strip of land outside the main gate, are you talking about the little triangle of grass in St. Hill Green itself?
No, so the main, you know how there's like 2 main gates at St. Hill. There's the one that everyone uses, and then there's the private one, right? The one that everyone uses, that whole area was redeveloped a couple of years ago. But irrespective of that, just in between the gate and the land, there's a strip of land that runs along the perimeter fence of the property before you hit the road. And in previous years, when protests have been held, the security company that work at St. Hill that are privately contracted are more than happy for protesters to use that space. It is public land. It's slightly off the road. It's big enough to get quite a large number of people along there. It's just not very deep, but it's plenty of space.
And when you say you're going to be there for 3 days, are you going to take tents, or are you going to how are you going to handle that logistically?
Yes, yeah. So essentially, the big main event is the Friday. So for everyone who knows about the IAS event, well, then those who don't, there's the main event, then there's the patrons ball, and then there's the charity gala, and they happen across the 3 days. So our plan is to have a presence there for all 3 days, but the main protest is the Friday. So if we there's a ditch there, Alex, be careful. Thank you, Danielle. Yes, and hopefully Danielle can make it. I know she's at the other end of the country, but if she can, that would be great. You're welcome anytime.
Hi, Danielle.
But yeah, so the main protest is the Friday. If we can get the permission to do the march, that's the big thing, and then we'll station ourselves there, and then we'll probably go to the pub, have a pint afterwards, and then some people have booked hotels, some people have got Airbnbs, and then we will return on the Saturday, and then we'll go back and return again on the Sunday.
Yeah, sure.
We do have permission from the rugby club, which is just over the road, to use their facilities, their toilets and stuff if we need to. And yeah, so we're going to be there, and there's going to be quite a large number of us.
Excellent. Well done. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Should be interesting. How about media? Have you contacted media to come out there? And
yes, there is a big media push at the moment. Hopefully we'll start to see something coming out soon. There's a couple of things in the works I can't talk about just yet, but 100% there will be coverage, there'll be cameras, and it will be filmed. And the main thing as well is it's a peaceful protest, right? We don't want to cause trouble or violence. We don't want to be trying to gain access to the event. We just want to make our presence known and send a really clear message that we want the abuses to stop, right? We have no problem with someone that believes in Scientology or wants to be a Scientologist. We're not there to harass or shout at the members. What we are there to do is say, hey, do you realize you're part of a group that is abusing people, that's forcing people to have abortions, that X, Y, and Z, all these things that you know about all the time, and maybe just drop some of these seeds that can get them to start thinking about their membership of this organization.
Right.
Fabulous.
Right. And I agree. It's the abuse has to stop, and the control of people's lives. It has to stop. That's not freedom.
Yeah.
Have
Exactly.
you got any other indication that Miscavige will definitely be there? I mean, I saw the pictures of them putting up the huge tent. They wouldn't spend that kind of money for like a local IAS person or something like that.
No, I mean, if David Miscavige wasn't going to be there in person, they would just hold it in the Great Hall, or they would just do a local event. You know, think about what they've done over the last 4 years. Their events have been filmed or recorded in the US and then beamed over, streamed to all the local orgs. And so they would do something similar. They wouldn't firstly advertise the greatest gathering of Scientologists without David Miscavige being there, or if he was to appear via video link. It would just be strange, and I don't think that's how they would do it. And also, I sent an insider to Birmingham Org recently who went in and spoke to a few staff members, and they confirmed that from multiple people at that org that 100% the expectation within Scientology is that Dave Miscavige will be there. They've heard nothing that would suggest he wouldn't be, and in fact, it would be weird for him not to be there. It's really, really important. Mike Rinder did an interview with Tony Ortega recently where he talked about the importance of this event for David Miscavige, and having known him personally, he kind of said, look, this is a sign. David Miscavige is wanting to send a message that he's still here. He's still very much in the leadership role in Scientology, and we are going to carry on progressing and doing what we're doing. It's a bold statement. So it would be very weird. The only reason I would see Miscavige to not show up would be if he changes his mind for some reason. You know, if we scare him away with our protest, or it becomes really clear that a plan is in place to serve him legal papers that he's been trying to avoid for years. If there is a real threat, he might backtrack and change his mind, but the tent has gone up and Scientologists definitely believe he's going to be there. So he'd have to come up with a good excuse if he was going to change his mind. Go on, Janis.
Yeah, well, with him helicoptering in, he's not going to be going through any way people can serve him, and his bodyguards would stop that anyway. So
Precisely.
I'm sure he'll be there. And you know, do you realize you have probably promoted this event to more people than they even have?
I have more subscribers on my YouTube channel than there are Scientologists in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
I have more subscribers than the capacity of the tent that they're building. If I get all of my subscribers, let alone all the other channels like yours that are promoting this, you know, if I can get all of my subscribers alone to watch the stream, the protest will have more support than the event itself.
Somebody asked this. This is a good question. Are drone cameras allowed in the UK?
Yes, I actually recently flew a drone over St. Hill. If you go to my channel, you can see we took a 4K drone and flew it over, and I kind of highlighted all the buildings and all this sort of stuff. It's really beautiful footage. So go and check that out. In terms of the event itself, yes, there are some regulations about what is and isn't allowed, and that my friend who is the one that flies the drone has a special license and that sort of thing, because there are a few restrictions in place because of its proximity to Gatwick Airport. But as far as I can tell, there wouldn't be a problem with us doing some sort of drone footage or someone doing that. The only exception being if there's a helicopter landing, then obviously the airspace will be closed to drones. So there's a few considerations like that to be made. But yeah, there's no reason why we can't.
Yeah, it'd be quite something if you had more people there than the IAS had for their own event. You know what I mean?
Well,
not protesting. That would be
yeah, we won't have that. We won't have more people in terms of physical presence.
Right.
There simply wouldn't be enough space. But in terms of online presence, 100% it's totally possible.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to. The tent's like 5,000. Legally, they're not allowed to have more than 7,000. I think the tent that they're building has a capacity of 5,000. It would be interesting to see if they fill it up or not.
That's great. Well, that bridges us over to our next part of the conversation about Scientology. It's basically an open conversation forum between Alex and Robin about Scientology, and we were going to start off with my rock slammer. We can explain people what rock slamming is in Scientology. We've embraced it here at our channel because, Janis, what do people have to do right now?
Rock slam the like button.
That's right. Rock slam that like button. Rock slam that like button. And Robin, can you explain to people what a rock slam actually is in Scientology?
Yes, I can. It's a very interesting question. When you use an e-meter as an aid for counseling, my experience with the e-meter generally was that it was a very effective and useful piece of what I would call biofeedback. and I'm not going to go into a lengthy explanation at this point in time, but for me, the e-meter is one of the most important parts of Scientology that doesn't exist anywhere else. It's what makes Scientology unique. And in the hands of a competent practitioner, it's a very useful tool for finding out those areas of emotional turmoil that the pre-clear needs to address. So it makes it very easy for the auditor to get to the bottom of what's troubling the pre-clear. And there are various needle motions on the dial that's on an e-meter, which stands for electropsychometer. And there's the well-known one of a floating needle, where the needle just floats idly from side to side, and it tends to indicate that your client is in a happy and released condition. And then there are other more jerky movements that can tell you what's happening in the pre-clear's mind as he's thinking about things. And one of the most controversial of these jerky motions is what's called a rock slam. And it's where the needle basically goes completely haywire, and instead of floating nicely from side to side, showing that your client is in a good condition, it just rockets all over the place. And that is supposed to indicate that you have some kind of evil intention or bad thought or evil purpose, whatever you want to call it. So if, for example, you're talking about apples and the needle starts to go berserk, then this person has got some weird purpose, evil purpose towards apples. And it's...
And of course, this is according to Hubbard, right? I mean,
yes.
That's his indication, right? No, there's no scientific evidence to know that that's true or not, other than just Hubbard said it was.
I have to agree with you on that point. And it's one of the aspects of Scientology technology that I disagree with. Because although I think all other aspects of the needle on an e-meter are very useful and beneficial, I think the rock slam, like the OT levels, is bullshit. And as somebody who was a qualified auditor and audited quite a number of hours, I never saw anything that I thought looked like a rock slam to me.
Okay. So Janis, can you explain to... I'm sorry, Robin, go ahead.
I was just going to add one thing. Sometimes what you can get is if the person touches the two cans together, for example, or some sort of electrical short circuit occurs, then it can be that that's exactly what the needle would do, right? Because of the electrical charges that are coming through. But that's a purely physical thing. It's nothing to do with the pre-clear's mind. Janis,
can you explain then now what happened in the late 70s to staff members when all of a sudden these rock slams are showing up, and it was called a list 1, which was a list of Scientology activities or people or that type of thing. If you rock slammed, according to the auditor, on a subject like L. Ron Hubbard or Mary Sue Hubbard or Scientology, that means you had an evil purpose towards it. So then they sent people to the RPF. Isn't that right? The Rehabilitation Project Force?
Yes, that's very correct. Yeah. So what would happen, even if you rock slammed and it wasn't a list 1, which was, L. Ron Hubbard, Mary Sue, Scientology. Nowadays, they've probably added David Miscavige to the list. But
they have. I can confirm they have.
Okay, good. But if you rock slammed on something else, you rock slammed on a fence or a bush, then nobody would care about that. But if you rock slammed on Mary Sue Hubbard, then that's a list 1 RSer. RSer being a rock slammer. So what happened in the late 70s was people that rock slammed on a list 1 were assigned to the Rehabilitation Project Force to get their case handle their evil purposes against Scientology or Mary Sue or Hubbard or whatever they rock slammed on. And what started happening is all sorts of people were suddenly rock slamming and would list one rock slammers. And then missions were sent to find all the rock slammers. And so
Like
a mission would be there.
It was like the Inquisition.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And so these people would go and just start sec checking or auditing or going through folders and seeing where there might be a dirty needle and then checking into that to see if they can create that rock slam. And then those people were all removed from post and put into the rehabilitation project force, including myself. And Robin.
And Robin.
Yes. So, yeah, I apparently rock slammed on Mary Sue, who for years, I'd had a good relationship with. And of all the messengers, I got along with her best. But here I am as the one that's rock slamming on her. And funnily enough, when I refused to go to the RPF because of this rock slam and was locked up for 11 days, it was a letter from Mary Sue to me where Hubbard had told her I was in the RPF, and she wrote me this long letter, pages and pages, explaining, the importance of doing the RPF and getting cleaned up, and what's a few months of getting cleaned up compared to 1 billion years. Mm-hmm. And it was her letter to me that finally convinced me to remain. And I ended up staying another 12 years. Wow. But yeah, that's what happens. But also, so many people were going to the RPF that finally Kimma Douglas, who was in charge of the household unit for Hubbard, she finally says to Hubbard, something is wrong. It wasn't Hubbard that realized it. It was Kimma. And she's like, something is wrong that so many good people. I mean, we're all high security cleared people up at winter headquarters in La Quinta. And people are falling like flies into the RPF. And so that's what Kimma points it out. And then Hubbard's like, yeah, you've got a point there. Yes, Robin.
Well, it was a witch hunt, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Listening to your description just now, Janis, puts me in mind of a sort of what they call a pogrom in a totalitarian state, where they invent an excuse for abusing a whole section of the community.
Right. Well, interestingly enough, it coincided with the purchase of the Blue Building, the Cedars. And so people were needed in order to renovate Cedars and get it all ready for all the orgs in Los Angeles to move into that building.
More of that cheap labor force.
Cheap labor force. I mean, it just totally coincidentally coincide with it. So,
yes, and funnily enough, at Flag, if you remember, at the Fort Harrison in Clearwater, there was a fire in the bank building.
That's right.
And that took enormous amounts of manpower from the from the RPF to deal with the damage there. So a similar situation, cheap labor, as you say.
Cheap. Now, talking about cheap labor, when you're in the rehabilitation project force, you're not allowed to operate any equipment. That's against the rules. So when we moved from the ship to land, the RPF weren't allowed to use vacuum cleaners.
Oh my gosh.
So what was so ridiculous about that was what the RPF called chicken picking.
Yes.
They would have to go out and peck like chickens to pick up little bits of lint from the carpet, and because they weren't allowed to use vacuums. I'm like, this is so ridiculous.
We had to do chicken picking as well. And, to this day, I remember it because it was Steve Marlowe, who was the RPF MAA at that point in time, who I'd been a very good friend of previously. And he instigated this chicken picking. So if we had nothing to do, all we had to do was drop on our knees and pick up bits of dust off the carpet, and that was considered to be a valuable activity. And to this day, when I pick up a bit of dust off my carpet here, I say to myself, chicken picking, and I think about Steve Marlowe all over again. It's great.
Oh my God.
It's crazy what stays with you, isn't it? Absolutely crazy.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
So Alex, was rock slamming ever? Well, when you were in Scientology more recently than we were, did that ever come up as a subject in London, or that you recall?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was in Division 6, which is the public-facing department of Scientology. So my job was to recruit new people to get them into Scientology. So I used the e-meter on a daily basis, right, giving people stress tests and this sort of thing. But I wasn't a trained, e-meter auditor, for example. So it's not something that I personally came across, but it is something that I'm sure was there. And I did see the term rock slam and RS and all of this there in the technical bulletins and stuff when I was, doing my studies and all of that. I just think the whole thing's so fascinating because when you think about it, what the e-meter does is measure the resistance between like the circuit it creates with your body. Scientifically, that's all it does. And everything that Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard wrote that means is pure fiction and not proven to be scientific or true at all, right? So the different reads on the meter, when L. Ron Hubbard said this means this and this means that, yeah, it could very well be true and it could line up with what people's experiences say. But there's never been a scientific study into actually what that means. And look, let's face it, if it was as accurate as Scientology believe, the FBI and so on would be using this religiously to try and kind of catch criminals and, because it's so accurate at picking up people's thoughts. So there isn't any evidence that what the different movements of the needle mean is actually true. It is an element of faith.
I'm just going to respond one point on it, though. Having audited other PCs, other people and stuff like that, I don't know about, Rock Slam and Theta Bop and all these other reads, right? But when a needle read, like when there was a read, like you asked a question, if there was what they called an instant read, it read, and you helped the person hone in on what are you looking at? What's that? What's that? And it would read again. What's that? And it would help the person spot in their subconscious or back in their mind what it is they're looking at. Oh, I see a boat. Okay, good. Tell me about the boat. And you get the person to actually talk and explain, oh yeah, I'm out on the ocean and there's a wave coming at me. And, oh, when was this? What time was it? What did it look like? What did it smell like? And that's all the background of how auditing's supposed to work. Basically, you get the person to recall a complete duplication of that incident, right? And if you do, and it has some emotional trauma or emotional what we call charge attached to it, once you got to the bottom of that chain, it would disappear. Now, I can't scientifically explain why that is, but I saw it happen over and over and over again, not as me getting auditing, but also as other people getting audited too. So the e-meter didn't do anything. It was a tool, like Robin said. That's what I agree with. It was a good tool to actually help. And in terms of police investigating and stuff like that, if you have a good security checker with a meter and you put the person in the room, they're going to find out what's going on as long as that person who's on the other end of the cans believes in the e-meter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they can lie all they want, but if they believe that in the e-meter, you'll get the information. Go ahead, Robin.
Right, and go on, Robin.
I'm sorry, Robin wanted to say something.
Yes.
I don't have a very high opinion of scientific evidence at this point in time. Scientific evidence has brought us the COVID vaccinations, amongst other things. So science is bought and owned by big business these days. What I do rely on is my own personal experience with an e-meter on both sides of the e-meter over many years, and having worked as an auditor for some time, dealing with dozens, if not hundreds, of fellow auditors who shared my experiences. And all I can tell you from the bottom of my heart is that the e-meter works. It's not a perfect instrument, and it takes a certain skill to make it work effectively. And I would also say it doesn't work on everybody. I've come across some people who just don't seem to read on it as others do. But what I can say is that in the hands of a competent practitioner, it's a miraculous piece of kit. And my experience makes me very confident about that. Although I know that you had a recently flag trained auditor who messed you up royally. So I can understand your skepticism on this point, Alex.
I think that one thing to consider is, look, I use the e-meter on a daily basis to locate people's ruins, right? So there is some truth in what both you and Mark said about the e-meter working, picking up people's thoughts. I saw it happen. I did that every single day. Tell me think about a time that, you were stressed, or think about something that's causing you trauma or something, and you see the e-meter read. So there is some validity to it having some sort of reaction in that is in sync with what you're thinking, but there hasn't been a scientific study into why that happens or whatever.
Right.
And I just think I want to pick up on a point you just said there, Robin, of it doesn't work on everybody. Well, this is a key problem for me with Scientology as a whole. Is Scientology is a totalitarian extremist belief system. In KSW, Keeping Scientology Working, which is the most important policy in Scientology, it basically says Scientology works 100% of the time when applied correctly, right? So if you apply it correctly, it will work. There isn't any room for interpretation, for potentially not working. It will work. So when you are saying the e-meter, for example, doesn't always work on 100% of the people, well, that's in complete contradiction to the Scientology policy that it will work 100% of the time. So that's why I have a problem with it, because if Scientology was more open to interpretations, or maybe the whole policy of what's true for me is true for you, if I take this bit, I believe in that, I apply it, it works, that's great, and that's how most religions operate. But Scientology is so totalitarian, it doesn't have room for it not working, which is why I have a problem with it.
I agree with you, Alex. The totalitarian, I'm the only one, and I know what I'm doing, and this is what it's supposed to be. I don't think that's what Robin's saying, because Robin and I don't agree with the OT levels either. You know what I mean? But you're correct too. It is a matter of faith. Okay, it is a matter of faith, but I experienced it in the real world, real things happening to me in a positive manner when it was properly applied. And so, I understand what you're saying. There is no scientific evidence, but I do know that when I would be blown out of my mind, feeling great at the end of a session, and the auditor said, your needle's floating, and that needle's just floating across like that, that indicated to me that, you had that I was done, or I had, a major win. And that's one of the things that Miscavige has completely bastardized when it comes to delivery of Scientology, because he changed the definition of what a floating needle was, right? And then he, not only that, the floating the meter is not infallible. Hubbard said the end phenomena is a floating needle, FN, very good indicators, and a cognition, a win. Those three things have to be present for that to be done, right? And he made it to a point where you could be blown out of your head and have a win, but then the needle doesn't quite register, or the auditor misses it. Then all of a sudden you're just saying, oh, well, you're not done on it, and it basically caves people in.
Yeah, go on, Janis. You had your hand up before me. Go on.
Yeah. I always found that if you're willing to cooperate and use the e-meter as a guide, it works for you. Yeah. But there are ways to make it not work by changing your thoughts from where you're being guided. You suddenly start thinking of running through a field of flowers, or, you think of beautiful things in order to get that distracted from the e-meter and get that floating needle that you're creating yourself, rather than going with following the direction of the meter.
Yeah, and that's where the faith part comes into it. Go ahead, Robin. You want to
Right.
say something?
Well, I've had so many beautiful experiences with an e-meter. And there's a point when you're auditing somebody and they have a life-changing cognition. And you can see it on the meter. You get what's called a long fall blowdown, where it comes from maybe 3 or higher on the tone arm, all the way down to 2.0. And then it goes into a wide FM that sometimes is so wide that you have to move the tone arm to keep the needle on that's called a floating tone arm.
Right.
Or an FNTA. And that's when you have a really major case change. And you can see the person cogniting in front of you. I could get quite emotional about it because it's a very beautiful experience. You're watching somebody having a profound psychological change, and their life is improving in front of you, and the meter is telling you exactly what you need to know, that is the end phenomenon of that process. You leave off, you take a break at that point because the guy's had a huge win. And I've also been on the receiving end of that. I've had huge wins and changes in my life in a session, and the auditor tells me your tone arm is floating. And I know, because that confirms for me the authenticity of the win. Alex?
I think that all sounds very lovely, right? And I'm not discrediting anyone's positive experience in auditing. I do believe that Scientology does have positive impacts for a lot of people in many ways, but it also has a lot of negative impacts, right? And I think this is one thing I'm trying to draw attention to, is whether the intention of how the e-meter is used and the intention of auditing, whether that actually lines up with its real true effects, you know. And let's take an example of my own personal experience. My last metered auditing session, I went in because I was upset about something that happened in the church, like you mentioned earlier, Robin, with a flag trained auditor. They'd just come back only a couple of weeks beforehand, having been trained in the Golden Age Tech 2 with the new e-meter that's meant to be more accurate than the last one, and went in, and I left that session because my needle had floated. However, I was upset, I was crying, and I was in a worse condition mentally than I was when I went into the session. And I made a bit of a fuss about that. And I said, look, auditing is meant to make you feel happier. Everything that you just said is meant to help locate areas of stress in your life, is meant to bring up on the tone scale. And that hasn't happened to me. I've come out feeling more upset than I was when I went in. And I think that is an example of what we need to look at, the reality of what's going on in Scientology, whether or not the intention was good and whether or not it does have positive impacts. Actually, right now, there are a lot of people who are being harmed by it, which I have a problem with. Go on, Janis.
I had the exact same thing happen with me, where on the happiness rundown of all things, where it was getting worse and worse for me, to the point where I had to get out of that session. And the auditor says, oh, your needle's floating. I'm like, thank God. And I went to the examiner and I was like, that was the worst session I have ever had.
Yeah.
And I just put down the cans and walked out.
But
that's happened to me. I went to the examiner and they were like, would you like to write a success story? I was like, no, I feel upset. I'm crying. Look at me. Do I look like I want to write a success story? And she was like, oh, okay.
But let me make a point here, Robin, first. Let me make a point. You know, it's like anything. You can use an oven for good, or you can use it for bad. Okay, you can cook a perfect cake, or you can run it too long and burn it. You know what I mean? It's not the equipment, it's not the item that is the problem. It's the person applying it. That's basically how Scientology is. You can use Scientology for good, but you also can use it for bad. And trust me, there are a lot of abuses and a lot of bad things that happened. Okay. We're just trying to show both sides, because I don't care what anybody says to me. You know, I agree with everybody should have their opinion, right? But the gains and the wins that I had in my early auditing, I'm talking about my early auditing, not the OT levels that I did, are still with me to this day. You know, it changed me positively as a person. Okay. And that was done through Scientology auditing with an auditor and a meter. and my faith in the fact that hopefully it's going to help me, So I'm not going to justify it if it's not for everybody, just like psychoanalysis is not for everybody. Christianity is not for everybody. Everybody has whatever it is, their truth that works for them. And some of Scientology worked for me, and some of it was absolutely horrible and didn't work at all. That's why we're having this discussion.
Yes, it's so interesting, comparing all of the positive experiences that I had with all the negative experiences that Alex had, which he was telling me about the other day. And I suppose I'm going to make a comment here that I believe that if you focus on negatives, you only ever get more negatives. And if you focus on positives, you get more positives. There's a sort of a rule in life that what you focus on expands. And while I had a number of negative experiences in the church, they seem as nothing to me now compared with the life-changing wins that I've had. And I feel a deep sense of gratitude to the church that they sorted me out when I was a foolish young man and allowed me to live a much happier and healthier life. Alex?
I think that, and this is one point, is that I'm not discrediting anyone's positive experience in Scientology. I took things away from Scientology that was positive, right? I had positive experiences as well as negative. So I'm not invalidating anyone that has a belief or whatever that says it works. You are entitled to your own belief. But what I'm talking, and what I particularly have an issue with, is the reality of the situation. Robin, I tend to agree with you on the, if you focus on the positives, you'll be happier, and negatives and so on. But that's not necessarily true when it comes to Scientology, because I was director of public book sales. I was very enthusiastic and upstat. My stats were in power. The fact that I was out selling so many books put London on the map, and international management knew about me and the great work I was doing disseminating Scientology. And I was 100% focused on the positives and the great work Scientology was doing for humankind. That was my viewpoint. And then the negatives outweighed the positives. That didn't mean I changed my attention. I was still focusing on selling books, even though the day before I was crying in a session. So the fact that it was negative isn't, I think, due to my mindset. It's because it was ultimately harmful in the way that it's done. And I think that anyone is entitled to their own opinion and belief system. I don't have a problem with people practicing Scientology as long as it doesn't hurt people. Mark, you were saying earlier about the oven example. Anyone can use an oven for a good or a bad purpose. But the thing there is, if someone does use the oven for a bad purpose, there are consequences, because that would be illegal, right? To hurt someone in some way using an oven. Whereas Scientology seems to have this state where it gets away with the harm and the damage it does to people with no repercussion.
Absolutely right.
And that's why I have an issue with it, because they're using this technology for bad and good, but there's no consequence for the bad, and that's why
you're absolutely right. And just so you know, for the people in the commenting and all that sort of thing, I left in 1990 because I started seeing bad, and it was time to go. The good that was going on in Scientology before that, when I was in, that was going away. I could see it. I tried to handle it. Miscavige was definitely taking things in a dark place. And we said, that's it. We're out. I'm not doing this anymore. You know what I mean? My intention was not to hurt people. My intention was to help myself and to help other people. So, absolutely. You're right. I mean, your experience is much later, closer to current times, right? That wasn't my experience when I got in Scientology. I want to get Janis in here. Janis, what's your viewpoint on all this?
Well, the golden age of tech, or whatever it's called, that didn't exist. And from what I've heard, that changed a lot of things. But I want to go back to the belief in the e-meter. And this is kind of a message to the people who are fence sitting or under the radar, because they won't connect up with people outside, family members who have been declared, who have left, or so forth, because they still believe in that e-meter. And if they get pulled in and sec checked, they believe it's going to read, and they're going to have to get off what they have now considered to be a withhold in communicating with family or that they need to disconnect and they haven't. And that's where there is no disconnect policy. It got canceled. So if you're afraid that it's going to read on the e-meter that you're talking to someone that you should have disconnected from, that's all in your own head. And of course, you're going to make that meter react because it's in your head. So get it out of your head. Disconnection does not exist. This is the world. Communicate. That's what Scientology was all about. Communicate. Communicate to your family outside. And if you get pulled in for set checking to see if you're talking to family members, it won't read if you don't think it's a withhold or an overt.
Well said, Janis. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's what we used to call a good withhold. I'd like to add something that I've been thinking about recently, which is when people like myself and David Mayo and Frankie Friedman and Captain Bill and all the people that I talked about in my earlier program, when we left the church, when we left the Sea Org back in the early 1980s, we all still wanted to continue delivering Scientology, right? We were still absolutely evangelical about getting the benefits of the technology out to the general public in a way that was not oppressive and was not abusive. That was the whole point of that movement back then. What I notice happening now is people, and perhaps Alex is a good example, people coming out of the Sea Org and out of the church now are so completely ARC broken with the whole thing that they don't want anything to do with it. They're not in the slightest bit interested in continuing to deliver because what Miscavige seems to achieve is he seems to kill the dream in people. So that the dream that they had when they first joined the Sea Org about clearing the planet and using the technology for good, that's been destroyed. And that is in very sharp contrast to those of us who came out 30 years ago.
That's a good point. I wanted to make sure one of our members, I started this question, but I'll bring it up because you're just talking about it. Michael Feldman, a member of our channel. Hi, Michael. Question, if the tech was so great, why have the vast majority of Class 12 auditors left Scientology? Most of the ones that I know, they continued to deliver Scientology after they left the Sea Organization. Isn't that right? Right? I mean,
yeah.
The ones that I knew, I mean, what Leon Steinberg did, Ken Urquhart did.
Amos, he was a 9. He wasn't a 12. Yeah.
But I mean, like Karen did for years, you know, I mean, there's other people, they continue to deliver outside. Barry Livingston did too. I know they became field auditors. So they did believe in the tech. They just didn't believe in the administration of Scientology and the direction it was going. And I can't, of course, that's not one for one everybody. I can't speak for everybody, but many of them did go back, continue, like you said, Robin, and continue to audit. David Mayo too. Go ahead.
Yeah, very much so. The problem with David Mayo particularly, and the others that you're talking about, the highly classed auditors, is that they had all, and I've talked to my good friend Ken Urquhart about this as well, who's also a Class 12, as you probably know. And the problem from my perspective is that they've all bought into the OT levels. And I think that messed them up a lot and caused them personal problems and difficulty. And one of the interesting things that I've had to observe is that outside the church, the technology has not really survived well. And that's something we have to take from the experience of the last 40 years. My center had to close down. David Mayo had to close down. There's almost nobody except my friend Max Howry in Switzerland who is delivering Scientology on what I would call a professional basis. I'm sure there are a few auditors around still delivering it to friends and family and so on. But the truth seems to be that Scientology needs the organization in order to prosper. And it hasn't prospered outside the church, unfortunately, as we hoped it would.
I think
Go ahead, Alex.
my question on that, therefore, is, does that not indicate that it isn't as wonderful and great as it's supposed to be? Because if it really did work, right, it's even LRH policy, right, is, you know, just deliver the services, right? If it really did work, then it would thrive and prosper and all of this. So clearly outside of the church, anyone doing independent Scientology, and again, I don't have a problem with people doing that, believing it, whatever. But Scientology allows for these abuses and things to happen inside its church, and that's what I have a problem with. If people deliver it outside of the church and then it ends up not being successful, and it's only successful because of the organization, well, there's two things. Firstly, does that not mean the thing isn't successful, because otherwise people would come and flock to it and join anyway? And secondly, if it needs the organization therefore needs to be accountable for the damage it is doing to people. And at the moment, it simply isn't being held accountable. And that's why I have an issue with it. Not the theology. I mean, I have my own opinions and thoughts on the theology of Scientology itself, which is a whole different video. But right now, the matter of fact is, this is what's going on, and it is under the name of Scientology. And I think that there needs to be change here, because it's not okay that families being disconnected, people are being locked in rooms and told they can't leave, thrown in the lake in the winter at St. Hill, and so on. You know, that's the reality of what is happening, and something needs to change. That's not a debate about the beliefs of Scientology.
No, exactly. And that's the thing, where there's a separation between the beliefs, people who believe in a religion, and the actual administration of the religion. And we're not just talking about Scientology. Go through history. You know what I mean? There are people who were very much Christians, right? But then you had the Holy Roman Empire, and you had the Inquisition in Spain, and you had all sorts of really terrible things that happened in the name of Christianity. And look what's happening right now in the Middle East, you know, without getting political. It has to do with religion, and it has to do with some people believe one thing and another people believe something else, and they're willing to die for it, you know. And so it's like Scientology is no different, you know. There are things that were good about it, and there were things that were really bad about it. But I'm not going to throw the good out just because I left because of the bad. I'm not in the bad anymore. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not defending Scientology. We're just having a discussion here, because I don't think, people can have their wins and have their gains. Look at Robin. Robin, you're not only Scientology, but you're also yoga and cannabis and all sorts of things right now, right?
He's a mixed practice.
I'm definitely mixing practices.
Definitely is not
practices.
keeping Scientology working. You are definitely not KSW keeping Scientology working.
You are other practices through and through. You're a squirrel, and your other practices.
And you're a drug revert.
Drug case.
Proud of it.
But I think that's a really good point, actually. It's like, that's what I mean. If you follow LRH by what he says to the letter, before David Miscavige came in and changed everything, because that's a whole nother debate. If you go back to what LRH actually said, if you do not follow it word by word to the T, you are not applying Scientology, because the whole point is you do it exactly as he says. So the moment you introduce other practices, or go and do your own thing, or interpret it, or say, I don't believe in this and I do believe in that, you are squirreling, which is against Scientology policy. So therefore, it kind of invalidates the word Scientology in what you're doing, and you're coming up with your own interpretation, which I think is a good thing. I think Scientology and other religions should allow for your own interpretation, what works for you, take the bits that work, and so on. But I don't think you can then call that Scientology if you're mixing it with other practices, right?
Well, actually, thanks, Alex. That's a very good point. And Mark, I want to congratulate you on the point that you just made, comparing it with what's going on in Israel, for example. You have to kind of get this into perspective. You're absolutely right. I just find that, well, put it like this. I was the first person 40 years ago to start criticizing it. And I now find myself in the position where I'm having to defend the technology. And I need to remind you guys, wait a minute, I was the first one that started to argue against it. And I think some people forget that when they see me defending what I consider to be the workable bits. I think I'm convinced that it's valuable. What I've done, in a nutshell, is I've taken those bits of Scientology that I find workable, I've mixed them with cannabis, and I've mixed them with yoga, and I've come up with my own blend, which, if you look at my website, I call life tech, which is a word that I stole from Frankie Friedman before he died. Bless him. He was a very good friend of mine. And he said, well, we're going to have to rename Scientology because the brand is broken. And that's why it won't work outside the organization, because there's so much bad PR associated with it that it won't take fruit at all. Janis.
So, Robin, are you a new guru for a cult?
Yeah, I'd love to start my own cult. I'd love to. Wouldn't you like to be a guru and have all these people working for you for nothing? I mean, that's what priests have been doing for thousands of years.
Yeah.
But what I've done is I've created what I call a synthesis, because I've found that there is synergy between the three disciplines: Scientology, the good bits of Scientology, the good bits of cannabis, the good bits of yoga. And all of them had bad bits, trust me, all of them. But for me, the combination of those three have worked very well for me. And that's what my website is all about, if anybody cares to join me. But I'm not giving anybody free weed, I can assure you.
Oh, I love it. And also, I would love, can you imagine, and I'm not suggesting this because weed is kind of on the question mark of legal or not legal in the UK, but wouldn't it be great to have a conversation like about the theology and beliefs of Scientology high? I would love to do that at some point with you guys. But I think that ultimately that's the point I'm trying to make about that I have no problem with people believing stuff. And Janis, your message to people currently in under the radar, I want to back that up as well in saying that, look, I don't have an issue with someone who comes out and just has an issue with David Miscavige or has an issue with the church but still believes in Scientology. You are entitled to your own belief. But my opinion on it is that Scientology itself doesn't allow for that. It is a binary choice. You're with us or against
Absolutely
us.
Right.
Die in the attempt is actual L. Ron Hubbard words. Yeah. And that's why it's problematic, right? Going back to the very basics of the theology and the belief system, because it doesn't allow for interpretation. If it allowed for that, it would be much more workable and helpful. I agree
with you, Alex, 100%. Go ahead, Robin.
I tried to join my local Christian church in the village here a year or so ago, but because I have certain theological disagreements with standard Christian theology, I was called a heretic and a lunatic.
Were they right or wrong?
It's like the abuses that we're talking about are common to all cultic organizations, and almost every organization, whether it's a religious one or an economic or political or social, they all have cultic phenomena, because this is what we call a third dynamic aberration, that you can have a group of perfectly nice individuals, but when they get together as a group, there's a group dynamic that comes into effect. And the first things you normally find is you get cliques, and then you get bullying, and then you get financial irregularities, and then you get sexual predators. And there's like a standard path that almost every organization goes down to a greater or lesser extent.
I think that's true. And my point, which I think on reflection, having thought about the conversation you and I, Robin, had the other day offline before this, my thinking is that doesn't make it okay or means that it can happen, right? And yes, Scientology is one of many groups, many religions that has its controversies. It's not free of that. But that doesn't mean that's okay and we shouldn't do something to stop it. And I think that's the problem I have, is that as it currently is, Scientology is getting away with a lot more than it should. And it's allowing things to happen that shouldn't be allowed to happen. If you look at something basic and simple, like, you know, bull baiting in the TRs, right? Is the idea behind it makes sense, right? Sit there, be able to confront anything. Someone can come and yell at you, and you train yourself to not be able to react. That's a good principle. But the downside is it allows people who, for example, like Danny Masterson, someone of that ilk, who has got away with harassment and certain activities that are not acceptable, it being put in that position allows them to get away with stuff that is illegal and shouldn't happen. Scientology shouldn't allow or give room for these things to occur, and it does, and it is not being held accountable. And that's why I have a problem. Yes, Robin.
Well, I admire your, you know, all your efforts to oppose these abuses. Believe me, and I think probably that what you're doing is a very valuable function, because somebody has to stand up and talk about it. But the real problem that you're running into is not Scientology. The real problem that you're running into, my friend, is human nature.
I don't believe it's human nature to lock someone in a room and tell them they can't leave until they've confessed to what they've done wrong. I've never had that inclination myself, and yet I was a victim of it.
Well, I still think what you're fighting ultimately is that people bring into any organization their own negativity, and that messes things up. And that's a much harder thing to handle than simply pointing out the abuses. I mean, look at the situation globally that we're in now. We're in a precarious situation. And the problems in Scientology are one thing. There are much, much worse problems elsewhere. And that also is down to human nature. And that is the problem that we all have to try and solve in as best we can. Because unfortunately, however good something is, somebody will come along and spoil it for you, I'm afraid to say. And that is life experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Go on, Mark. Go on.
No, I just wanted to get to wrap up here and go to viewer questions here as well. But I think this
I was just getting started.
I know you were. I knew you were. Alex, you make great points. You know, I mean, I totally respect what you're doing. And listen, you know, if Scientology, look, I did my Scientology, the good parts of Scientology, in my opinion, right? So I'm not out looking to reestablish Scientology somewhere or to reestablish things. I just want people to know what happened, you know what I mean, in terms of the history, but also, you know, that nobody has all the answers. That's my point. And I think you were making that as well, Alex and Robin, is that not everybody had, you know, Hubbard was totalitarian. Absolutely. I would not go back to that, you know, but the things that work, just like I said, you know, if your oven works, it works, you know, you use it, you know, but you don't use it if it's broken. And I mean, that's a very simplistic analogy, but that's just my viewpoint on these things, you know, and I absolutely think any abuse or anything like that is absolutely not okay. I mean, why am I speaking out? I'm speaking out because I want it to stop too. We're exposing Miscavige because I want him stopped. He should be in jail. You know, and that's it. And Scientology in its current format, even with L. Ron Hubbard, it would have to change. There's no way I would go back, you know. Anyway, I just wanted to state that for the record.
Yeah, I think the point I'm trying to make, sorry, very, very quickly, the point I'm trying to make is exactly that, Mark, is I am not debating or questioning the theology of Scientology with the protest and so on. I have my own views on it, and there is a debate to be had there that I'm sure I will continue to have on my channel. But the main point here is trying to make sure the organization that is the Church of Scientology is held responsible and accountable for its actions and the actions of its members that are happening on its premises and under its leadership and guidance.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. I was just
No,
going
I
to
didn't
say,
mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
I think there needs to be more accountability, and those things need to be stopped. It's not a debate about the belief system. That is a debate, but when I say Scientology needs to stop or United Against Scientology, like on my t-shirt, I'm talking about these things shouldn't be happening. We can get into the theological discussion about what they believe and whether it actually works or not in a different argument. But ultimately, people are being harmed and damaged by Scientology, whether you like it or not, and that needs to be stopped.
Absolutely. And I put up Danielle's comment here right now because she's absolutely correct. We could never have this discussion, even sitting around having coffee or tea, if we were in the Sea Organization. You know what I mean? We couldn't talk about this stuff. We'd be like, what is your own ethics? What is where's your misunderstood word?
I came out of this session and said, oh, I'm more upset than I was when I went in. All I want is the session to work and to make me feel happier. And then I was told to do an OW writer. What have you done wrong? Nothing. I just want to be happy again. Well, why aren't you happy? Because you made me upset. I want to be not upset.
Go ahead, Janis.
They should have actually red tagged your folder and taken you back in for a cleanup.
I did. I did red tag and I went in the next day. But then the CS was sick, which was even funnier because that means the CS was PTS, potential trouble source.
Yeah, but no, what I wanted to, I want to say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
DM has taken abuse to a whole new level, but I want to point out, having been born into Scientology and then in the Sea Org since I was 11 years old for 22 years, it's not just the people at the top who abuse. It's in there where people on their own will abuse other people through their own misduplication of what the policy is, or their own thoughts of everything's so great. This is it. We got to clear the planet, and they will attack anybody else who doesn't have that same dedication in their eyes. And that's where the abuse continues. So it's not just Miscavige, it's throughout, and it's been there from day one. It's not just a new thing.
That's the point I was trying to make with the TR bull baiting, right? Is like, if someone wants to abuse someone, right? If you're doing bull baiting, it gives you the perfect opportunity to get away with it, because the whole point is trying to get the other person to react. So if you are that way inclined, Scientology gives you a great environment to go and do that. And that's what I think that then starts to be the debate about whether Scientology belief and what it actually is harmful in and of itself. I know I'm wrapping up, sorry Mark, but this is the point, is like, if it allows the stuff that shouldn't be happening to happen, and then when you start really peeling the onion, as your channel title is, well, what is it about Scientology that is harmful? Well, why does it allow people to get away with this stuff? Well, because that's what bull baiting is. Okay, well then the question is bull baiting helpful or not? And then it becomes a theological discussion.
And you know what, as a kid watching bull baiting going on, and even growing up and thinking about it later, there is bull baiting that is done that is totally unnecessary and unrealistic that it would ever even happen. But people are taking advantage of it to act out and be ridiculous or whatever.
Okay. This has been a great discussion. We're going to go to our viewer questions now, because they want to participate as well. But this has been very good, very helpful. And like I said, we're all rock slammers, okay? We're all rock slammers. Everybody on the planet is a rock slammer, because we all are imperfect people. We are not perfect, right? But you know what? We're embracing it, because we're going to rock slam the abuses out of Scientology, all right? So I just wanted to mention that.
Mark.
And if you want to order one of these shirts, we've got them on our website. Just go ahead and click on the merchandise site, and we'll go from there. I'm going to go into the questions here, okay? And we'll get on that. Before I do that, please subscribe to Alex's channel. He needs to get to 10,000 subscribers so he can, raise money and for, to fight on against Scientology and the abuses. All right. And we did make it, Janis. We're at 9,002. So we're over 9,000 subscribers. But if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to our channel at Mark Fisher and Janis Gillham Grady. We really appreciate everybody watching here. And just so you know, we're open to the people. Some people may be disturbed about what we're talking about. We're not promoting Scientology. Okay, we're not, but we're trying to tell the history and the story so that people can make informed decisions in terms of leading their lives and what they're going to do. So, we're here just to provide a forum. It's a healthy way to discuss things. This is what doesn't happen in society these days. It's always left or right, black or white, gray. You know what I mean? It's never in the middle. And so that's what this forum is for people to discuss. And saying that, we're going to go to you, the viewers, and see what you have to say. Okay. So we got something from L. Ron Hubbard. It's a question for all four panelists. In the present situation, what will be going on at the Tel Aviv org? Your view is still open for business or not?
Well, all I'll say
No.
is it's Scientology policy to never close an org, which I think is stupid, because in today's environment like this, it's probably a very smart thing to close the org and evacuate and perhaps look after your staff members and make sure that they're not in any danger. However, the policy is to never close an org. So if they follow LRH per policy, they should still be open. But if they've gone off policy and done the right thing, they'll be closed.
Right.
Fabulous.
And I hope they are closed.
Yes.
Yeah,
And they're at home. They're with their families and friends and taking care of whatever they have to survive.
PTS for life. Question for Alex. How did you become so handsome?
Stop it. Right. PTS for life is Jeff Beaumont. He's a real good friend of mine. He used to be a staff member at the Church of Scientology Vancouver. He just started a channel talking about his experiences, and he's also ginger, and he's a former Scientologist, and we have a bit of a bromance going on where we keep teasing each other on each other's live streams.
Isn't he the one that said that you rock slam 4 strip clubs in
I
London?
think it was, yeah.
Okay, great. We've got here Sea Org tech discussion. Question to Robin. I've tried to contact you via Facebook, but get no answer. Did I do something wrong? Is there a way that people can contact
Robin,
yes.
that's a flunk for Comlag.
It's a funny situation. If it's the person I'm thinking of, please either go to my website or my personal Facebook page. For some reason, I think you tried to contact me through my Life Tech Facebook page, and I was unable to respond to your messages. So my sincere apologies. Please try and contact me either by email. Mark will give you my email address, and I'd be very happy to talk to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. We've got a super chat. Thank you so much. David McSausage said, hello, guys. Well, we say hello back. And by the way, Janis, are we open to interviewing David Miscavige on this channel?
Yes, I am handing out the challenge. I'm throwing down the glove, man.
Wow.
If he wants to come on and have a conversation with me and Mark, we're open.
You know
I
what?
want to be in on
Alex
that
too.
Conversation.
I too second that. If David Miscavige ever wants to come on my channel, you know what? I'll even do a fundraiser to pay his appearance fee.
That's great. Okay, thank you for that. And we got another super chat from Lean On Me. Thank you so much. Amen, Robin. It is human nature. Scientology didn't start with locking people up. It started with a semblance of control and grew from there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
That's a nice comment. Thank you so much, Lean On Me. We appreciate it. Okay, back up here. This is for Janis from Michael McKay. Question, Janis, were you on the Apollo in 1968? I was just watching an LRH lecture and wanted to know your thoughts. It was October 1968.
Yes, I was on the Apollo in 1968. I actually arrived in January 1968 on the Royal Scotsman, which became the Apollo. And I was a messenger since May of 1968. So I might have been one of the people that recorded that lecture, or it could have been one of the other 3 messengers.
Great.
Okay. Thank you, Michael McKay. All right. We've got a comment. Ideal Borg, a.k.a. CO Bilf. With all the St. Hill security focused on Alex's protest, Robin will be able to snag the OT9 and 10 materials from the monkey room.
Yeah, Robin, you should come along. And, you're welcome.
Well, I should really. I should. It's a long way, but we'll talk. We'll talk.
Yes. Yeah.
For anybody who has not seen Robin before, you should watch our video that Robin put together on his fascinating life on our channel, where he talks about where in 1983 he and a couple of friends, they went into the organization in Denmark in Sea Org uniforms and walked out with the OT levels, Ned for OTs, just walked in, said we were a Scientology mission, and walked out with them. And that's how they got out, was that.
Legendary.
So anyway, it's an interesting story.
Legendary.
If you want to watch it, please watch that.
Thank you. Thank you.
We've got another fun question from L. Ron Hubbard. Question for all four. If I raise the wages to $52 a week, will you all come back? No.
No.
No. Even if you raised it to minimum wage, I wouldn't come back.
Or maximum wage.
Yeah.
I wouldn't come back for the money, but I would come back if it was reorganized along the lines that it should have been originally ideally organized. If it was a perfect Sea Org, the way it was meant to operate, I would certainly return, and I certainly intend to return in my next lifetime to see what I can do to improve things.
You'll be a comebacker. Yeah.
I am a comebacker. That's our motto. We come back.
Okay, thanks very much, L. Ron Hubbard. Question from Hans Christian Schwartz. Question, Alex, are there indicators they're using SO, Sea Org, and UK staff to fill up the tent for the event?
Yeah, so if you live in the UK, Europe, or really anywhere in the world, if you are able to attend the IAS event, you are expected to go. If you can afford flights, if you are in the UK, you are expected to go. And if you don't, there will be questions as to why. Now, when it comes to the staff and Sea Org, obviously, it's a huge event, and staff from local orgs are sent down to St. Hill to help prepare for the event. So, for example, the IAS event is in St. Hill, so a lot of the London staff will be sent down in the days prior to set up the chairs, for example, and they are very much there working the event. Staff also have roles during the event, welcoming people, handing out leaflets, showing people to their chairs, and so on. It is staffed almost entirely by Scientology, with the exception of security and catering and the F&B hospitality stuff, which is done externally. So yeah, they'll definitely be there, and all staff will be expected to be there if they can. There'll just be a skeleton crew of people left at the orgs during that weekend, because as I mentioned, it's a suppressive act to close an org. So all orgs, Birmingham, Plymouth, Sunderland, Manchester, Edinburgh, Happy, and all of this, they will still be open that weekend with like a handful of staff, just in case someone does walk in or people can't attend the IAS event themselves. So there'll be a skeleton crew, but most people will be down at the event. In terms of whether they fill it up to make it look busy, even if they have 100% of UK staff there in the tent, that would be but a small proportion of the space available in the tent. They will need to hire extras or actors or people to make it look busy if they are unable to fill up the seats. But I genuinely believe that they won't need to do that. I genuinely believe they'll get enough people to make it busy, because it is the first event in 4 years. David Miscavige is coming over here for the first time in that amount of time. It's the greatest gathering of Scientologists. They won't have a tough time fitting that tent up.
Okay. Yeah, Janis.
Yes. Just a warning, anyone watching this, if you intend to go, and you want to stay out of trouble, make sure you clap. You have to clap, and you have to do your hip hip hoorays. Because if you don't, there will be people watching to see who is not clapping or cheering or smiling with good indicators, and they will be singled out and taken to ethics to find out what their withholds are. So don't say you weren't warned if you show up.
Absolutely. And we'll be clapping from the streets as well. Don't you worry.
That's great. Michael Winecoop, question, can't DM be served any court papers pending since they know he will be there? I don't know what the laws are like in the UK in terms of serving papers from a US court.
This is a question I get a lot, and all I can say on it is, yes, it is possible. There is a way. It is a risk David Miscavige is taking. It's not easy, but it is possible. And for David Miscavige to arrive in the UK and be in an exact place at an exact time that we know in advance is a risk. And yes, it is possible, but I can't talk too much about it right now.
Okay. Thanks very much. All right, we'll go to the next question here. PTS realized someone needs to make a chicken picking meme.
If someone doesn't make merch, I'm definitely going to. Well, I think we should all make merch. That'd be quite funny. Picking.
Okay, thanks very much. That's funny. Again, Hans Christian Schwartz, Robin, when I was at Pubs DK in 78, the e-meter repair replaced any cheap potentiometers with wired ones because the rub off from the cheap ones would cause the rock slams.
Yes,
That's entirely possible. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's almost certainly true. I mentioned earlier that they can be caused by an electrical fault. And I appreciate that remark from Hans Christian. Thank you.
And also, don't forget the e-meters have all changed yet again. While I was on staff around 2013, 2014, they released a new e-meter, which is the one they're currently using. It's all fancy and lovely. And that came with new cans and new connectors, and the whole package was redesigned. And it now has some sort of digital component where you have to plug it into the computer or the internet every 6 months to silver cert it. That process includes checking you have a valid IAS membership. So if you don't, the e-meter will simply stop working. And there's some sorry, go.
No, and I was going to say I would worry about Scientology basically spying on that meter. Do you know what I mean? Those new meters. Yeah. In other words, they have some kind of connection, some kind of software in there where they know exactly what you're doing with the meter. It's crazy.
Yeah, and there's also some digital component as well. And I understand the reason behind it is, say for example, the needle is going to make a motion that does this or whatever, right? The software, but it's very slight. The software is meant to amplify it to make it easier for the auditor to recognize the motion according to these pre-programmed things that it's meant to do. So in a way, it's actually manipulating and changing what the needle is really doing through this software with good intentions, but whether or not that's actually on policy or not is debatable.
Okay, let's get to an important question here. This is from, I'm sorry, Janis, what did you want to say?
Well, yeah, I noticed, and the question hasn't shown up, but I noticed someone was trying to make a joke about people that didn't have hands and how could they be audited. Well, when I was there, they had foot plates.
Yeah.
So someone with one hand or whatever, you have foot plates. You take a can and you just cut it and you lay it out and you hook that on with the alligator clips, and people get audited using their feet instead of hands.
Yeah. That's
well,
right.
Nowadays, I assure you, they wouldn't audit anyone with no hands or no arms or anything, because they would be considered a degraded being, with the thought being, what did you do to put yourself in the situation where you had that happen to you, or you have this disability or whatever, and so therefore you just simply wouldn't be audited.
Well, there was a class 12 auditor, Anne Glushkow, who actually did not have, she had half of an arm. And she was one of the top auditors. And, you know, so
how
she
things
wasn't
have changed,
treated
right,
that way.
Janis?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, now I'll get to this next question here. This is from Rune Sky Teasing. I wonder what cannabis strains that Mr. Scott's choices. Some high CBD levels, perhaps, in indicas, sativas, or hybrids.
I've been looking at some of the comments and questions, and I distinctly get the feeling that people are much more interested in talking to me about cannabis than Scientology. So you'll have to get me back another day, and I'll give you my thoughts on cannabis, because I have even more to say on that subject than I do on Scientology. But just to answer Rune's question, I'm a sativa man through and through. For those of you who know the difference between indicas and sativas, which I'm not going to try and explain now, but I am a sativa man because that gives you what we call a cerebral high, rather than a strong physical trip, which you get from the indica. A sativa gives you a cerebral high so that you're intellectually, mentally stimulated, but not overwhelmed physically. And that's my, as a philosopher, that's my preference. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thanks very much. And we'll go to the next one here. This is from Cornelius Atonus. Question: I heard Hubbard on some audio that was posted on YouTube 15 years ago screaming about only auditing from a prepared list? Is the sex with the bird auditing question on that prepared list? I don't know.
I have no idea what this is about.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's that question.
Send us a link. Send us a link
Yeah.
to the YouTube
Yeah.
thing, we can watch it and get back to you.
It sounds to me like a question that might have come off the Joburg. If
That's
you
what I was
remember.
going to say.
Yeah.
Which asked for all sorts of depraved activities, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see what's next here. Questions. All right, here's a question from Moon Age Daydream. Mark, how big a role do you think that belief/faith in the device and process has on whether it might give you a positive experience? Well, my first ever auditing session, I was 14 years old, and I didn't even really know what it was. I just picked up the cans, and I had an auditor, and she asked me questions, and I answered. She used the e-meter in order to, what's that? What are you thinking of? Just directing it. I had no idea what she was doing or what the e-meter did. But then when I had this big blown out feeling where I was just blown out and feeling great, and she said, your needle's floating. And I said, what's that mean? And she says, well, that means that we're at the end here. So I didn't have any belief or faith in it. It just was, the meter was used by a good auditor that indicated the right things. And I was like, I got hooked really fast that way because I wanted that feeling all the time. So I know, Alex, you and I have talked about this before, about there's a feeling of euphoria and it can become addicting. And, but that's where my belief in the e-meter came from. But really it was the belief in the e-meter in retrospect and a good auditor. You were going to say something, Robin?
Yeah, I think that's a very profound question, actually, because I think I completely agree. If you have a very strong belief or faith in the process and in the device, I think it gives you a positive experience. If you go in with positive expectations, you're more likely to get a positive result. And I think that's why Scientology worked so well for me, because I really believed in it. I really was convinced that this was a workable solution. And as a result, I got very good results from it. So, yeah, I totally agree with the question. Thank you.
Okay. Next question is from PTS for Life comment. Do you think that the lack of positive experiences with Scientology is a generational thing? Scientology of days gone by was better than more recent Scientology? Yes, I do think that's part of it.
So do I.
Yeah.
Yes.
That doesn't mean there weren't abuses by Hubbard back in the old days. I mean, we've talked about that on the ship, locking people up in the chain locker, things like that. And he was not completely sane. But the experiences were much greater in those early days. Go ahead, Janis.
Yeah, I grew up as a kid in a mission. My parents had a mission that, so it was always around me, and it was a happy mission and people loved it. And I know of other people who later went to St. Hill and they were like, they wanted to go back to the old mission because it was a happier times for them. And they felt they had actual wins and gains through Scientology at the mission than abuse at St. Hill or in the Sea Org.
I think this is where it becomes a question of whether it's just the organization that is Scientology that is harmful, or whether it is Scientology in and of itself. And that's where you start questioning the theology of like, well, generational, was it bad back then? Was it not bad? There's questions, and I think there's validity to both arguments. When I joined Scientology, I had wins, I enjoyed it, and then I ended up, being kicked out and not thinking the same thing. So I think that what Jeff is saying here about there being a different experience generationally, I think it's true, but I think let's look at why. And I think, yes, Scientology has changed in terms of organization, but actually the way it's delivered has changed. And the question is whether the actual practice itself is harmful. And I don't think that brings into account whether it's generational or not. I think if it's applied in certain ways, it can be harmful in and of itself.
Okay. Thanks very much for that question, PTS for life. All right, next question is from Sea Org Tech Discussions. Dear Alex, by your description, you got a terribly botched session. It's impossible to get that result from someone who knows how to audit.
Yep.
That's really a comment more than a question.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, my auditor had just come back from FLAG, being trained at the highest level by the best trained auditors at the best place on earth. Apparently, according to Scientology, they had just come back in the Golden Age Tech 2. It was the highest class auditor or trained auditor there was at London Org. They knew what they were doing. It didn't go well. I red tagged and went back in the following day. London, strangely, had at the time a really highly qualified team of staff, auditors and auditors working for them, because they sent a huge proportion of staff to train at FLAG for Golden Age Tech 2 and then came back. So yeah, my session went wrong. And the reason I ultimately got kicked out was because I said, look, I think my session has gone wrong. This doesn't sound right. This isn't how auditing should be delivered. And if it was done correctly, I wouldn't be having the reaction I have now. And they took that to mean I was saying Scientology doesn't work, and therefore declared me a potential trouble source and kicked me out. When all I was doing is trying to get it to work on me when it wasn't.
Well,
but that's the reality of how Scientology is being applied right now.
Well, and just to make a comment, I mean, it was changed. Whatever training they got at FLAG had been changed by Miscavige. I mean, that's the thing. After Hubbard died, I mean, things were changing all the time when Hubbard was alive, but he was still alive, and we believed in him at the time. But, not everything he did worked, but the standard procedure, Robin will attest to this, was like what this gentleman said, is that if you have a bad session, they red tag the folder and you are gotten back in right away, because the plan is that you have good indicators when you're done. And that just means that they missed something and they didn't apply it correctly. And, but it's possible they were applying it incorrectly because it got changed again by Miscavige. Who knows, There's no absolute. Let's just put it that way. No absolute on this stuff. Anyway, thanks for that comment. We've got here, Robin, you are a senior citizen that was lucky enough to do all that you do. My concern is about the senior citizens packed 12 in a room who don't have the means to ever live out such a life. Yeah, we don't like the abuses either. The elder abuses is terrible. Robin, do you have any comment?
Well, if I'm honest, I was smart enough to get out when the writing was on the wall. And I got out in 1981, which was even actually before Miscavige formally took over. But I could sense that things were going badly in the wrong direction. And I got out with my lovely wife and our children, and were able to go and create, using the skills that I'd learned in Scientology, we were able to go out and create a really good life for ourselves. But the senior citizens packed 12 in a room is a tragedy. And probably those are some of the people that I was friendly with back in the day. But I have to be frank and say that to some extent, they were the victims of their own poor judgment. They could have got out just when we got out. And I know this sounds a bit unsympathetic, but I do get a little fed up with people complaining about what Scientology has done to them when they were stupid enough to stay there so long and allow themselves to go down the tubes. So I'm a bit torn on this. I know there are people suffering, but they are the architects of their own misfortune, in my honest opinion. And I realize that may not be a popular answer, but that's my honest thought.
I think, and we're not going to debate this too much because we will be here for another hour, but I do just feel like I need to make a little point here, Robin, in that I get what you're saying, but if you consider the experience of some people today, for example, they've been raised in Scientology or they're in the Sea Org, you know, they're put in a position where they have no choice but to continue in Scientology, even if they don't agree with it sometimes, you know, because it's presented to them like you have a choice. You either, you know, have an abortion that you don't want, you or you know, or you leave Scientology and disconnect from your family, and you can't, you know, so people have to make this choice. Do I go with what I think is right and what I want to do and lose everything that I know, that I love, and that I believe in? Or do I carry on and and suffer a little bit, but at least I get to be with my family? Right? That is a choice a lot of people have to make. And I think that is why you end up in a situation sometimes where people have been disaffected for many, many years, and it just gets worse and worse and worse because they're being told they have to make this choice. And I don't think that you should ever be put in a position where you have to choose between your faith and your family. Janis.
I absolutely agree with what you said there, because I've gone through that many times, having been born into Scientology and then in the Sea Org, and there was times I wanted to leave. I had nowhere to go. I didn't know how to operate in the outside world. And I didn't even know who to go to, because your mindset is you have friends who are all Scientologists, but you know as soon as you leave, they're no longer your friend.
Yeah.
And then how can you go to your other friends who are all declared? Because then you wouldn't be able to get back in, because you're now connected to suppressive people. And it's a real mind warp that happens to you, and you're kind of stuck and don't know where to go.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, many times I would have left, but I didn't because of that situation. I had my parents. I finally did leave because my husband was at the same mindset as I at the same time. And that's why we were able to leave together. But otherwise, other people, you can't communicate with each other that you want to leave. But also, if I say to him, I want to leave, you want to come with me, he might turn me in.
Yeah.
You know, and then you know you're under God for the next year or two.
And that's why the Aftermath Foundation is great, because if anyone who's currently in that wants to escape or leave or whatever, they're not in the business of trying to convince you that Scientology is bad or convince you to leave. They won't do that. They just exist to help you get set up so that those basic human necessities you don't have to worry about. You know, you'll have accommodation, a roof over your head, food, you know, money to survive, you know, plane trip to reunite with your family, whatever you need, so that that leaving process is a little bit less painful and you can worry about what's going on in your head. That's what the Aftermath Foundation is doing, and that's why I just wanted to plug it there a little bit.
Yes, and I totally support Aftermath, what they're doing. It's great. Very needed.
All right, next, Heidi Word, Super Sicker. Thank you so much, Heidi. We appreciate that. And L. Ron Hubbard sends a super chat. That was a big mistake. I pressed the wrong button. Okay. Thank you for that. And then here's a question here from Heidi Wirt. Again, Alex, are there any actions happening simultaneously in Clearwater at the same time as your action against the IAS event overseas?
No, not that I'm aware of, because the IAS event is the big, large event in the Scientology calendar. Internationally, people will be flying from Clearwater to the UK to attend the IAS event. It's happening in person here in the UK, 3rd, 4th, and 5th of November. It will then be videotaped, and within a week, there'll be an event at all the local orgs. So I'm sure there'll be an event at Flag in Clearwater the following week, where it's then played as a videotape, as an event to all of the public who couldn't go to the UK to watch it and to be there in person. But yeah, so no, there's no simultaneous actions happening in Clearwater. But there is another protest I'm aware of. I think Liz Ferris is organizing on the 21st of October at the Celebrity Center in Los Angeles, I believe. I don't think it's a protest against the IAS. It's a protest more to help her find her father and all of that. So go and check out Liz Ferris's channel if you're in LA and want to participate in a protest. But if you're abroad and want to participate in the protest on the 3rd, 4th, 5th of November, watch us on a live stream. Give me a sub, and I will be live streaming it.
Okay. Thanks very much. Betsy Sue. Hi, Betsy Sue. She's a member of our channel. Question, Alex, what happened to your Goldie merch?
Goldie launched a buy me a coffee thing. So if you want to support, so I had Goldie merch in that if you wanted to support Goldie, you could buy some merch and support her that way because there was no way of supporting her. She now has launched her own buy me a coffee. So if you want to support her, you can directly go and buy her a coffee. And that saves the hassle of me having to figure out how much money was made from each Goldie mug and then send it to her every month and all that. So you can support her directly now. That's why I don't have Goldie merch on my site anymore.
Thank you, Betsy Sue. Goldie's great. And then Catherine, Mark, you've been great, and I've so appreciated your contribution to this convo. All of you. I want to thank everybody too. We are at the end here, but I want to thank Robin, I want to thank Alex, and of course Janis, my co-host. And Robin, have you got any closing comments or words that you'd like to say? And then I'm going to ask the same with Alex.
No, thank you. It's been a really enjoyable conversation, and I'm most grateful to all of you. Thank you.
Likewise, always happy to have a debate. I'm glad. This is the one thing you can't do in Scientology is debate and think about things and question things and have a healthy intellectual debate. And that's what I love about being out. And I want to really encourage that. And yeah, top respect to Robin for everything he's done in the fight against Scientology, even if we disagree on some of the theology. But that's what we're here to talk about, and that's what I love. So yeah, mad respect for you. And thank you.
That doesn't make us not friends. You know what I mean? I have people I disagree with politically, but I still like them. There's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, if you want to subscribe to Alex's channel at Apostate Alex, please get him up to 10,000 subscribers. And then, of course, please subscribe to our channel, Mark Fisher and Janis Gillham Grady. We appreciate the support. If you have any questions that we missed, please ask in the comment section. I check them all the time. So does Janis, and we will definitely answer them there. And I just want to quickly put up two things. Robin, you've got two books that are available at www.lifetech.org.uk. Robin, what are the titles of your books if people are interested?
The first is called The Significance of Scientology, and the second is called The Case for Cannabis. Thank you for mentioning them.
Yeah, so you can order them there at his website if you're interested for The Case for Cannabis and The Significance of Scientology. They're two great books that Robin's written. You can order them there. Okay. One last plug for me. I've started a fun site, YouTube channel. If you go to @mfisherlv, please subscribe. It's going to be all about Las Vegas and travel. It's just sort of a fun little flirty thing for me to do, but I would appreciate it if you subscribe. There'll be short little videos about Las Vegas, all things Las Vegas, okay, and also travel and all that sort of thing. So if you get a chance, please subscribe to that channel as well. I want to thank everybody for being here. Janis has one more command for everybody.
Rock slam the like.
Yes.
Rock slam that like, everybody, because we need the support. These are healthy discussions to have, and we want to continue doing it. And I just want to thank everybody for being here and supporting our channels. And until the next time, bye-bye.
Bye.